Before we get started in the Dharma talk, please join me in invoking the Buddha's name 3 times. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Dear Venerable Abbot, dear Sangha, good afternoon. So today we will be covering chapter 22 of the Lotus Sutra, entitled Entrustment. Ironically, it comes at a good time because we are entrusting the Sangha to take care of the temple while we are traveling next week. So, coincidence? I think not. Yes. Okay, so chapter 22, entrustment. This is, even though there's 28 chapters in the sutra, this chapter is the chapter that concludes the Buddha's teachings in the Lotus Sutra. So up until chapter 21, all these chapters were discourses and teachings that the Buddha was giving. Is that necessary? Teachings that the Buddha was giving to the disciples and to the Sangha. And so 22 is the conclusion to those teachings. And it's entitled Entrustment because the Buddha is entrusting the bodhisattvas and the disciples in the assembly, amongst nuns, laymen, laywomen, to take care of the teachings, take care of the Dharma after his parinirvana. His parinirvana is kind of like his final death, his deathbed. And so toward the end of the entire sutra, the Buddha is mentioning that his parinirvana is nearing, it's coming to an end soon, which is follows the kind of correct pattern of sutra discussions, because the Lotus Sutra was given toward the end of the end of the Buddha's life, along with the Mahaparinirvana Sutra. And so the entirety of this chapter is kind of emphasizing the importance of the Lotus Sutra itself, because the Lotus Sutra itself is concluding, it's the pinnacle of all the Buddhist teachings. And it's within the sutra that has the ability to provide enlightenment to all sentient beings. And it's one of the only sutras that does that. Because in other sutras, it's always, not always, but it's most likely always pertain to a certain type of group of people that will attain enlightenment. So in other sutras, it's whether it's either the bodhisattvas specifically that he's speaking to, or in other sutras, the arhats that he's speaking to specifically, or the lay disciples that are able to ascend the different levels of enlightenment. And so there's always specific groups or specific people or specific assemblies that the Buddha is teaching that he confirms enlightenment for them. Whereas in the Lotus Sutra, it's kind of a blanket prediction of enlightenment for all sentient beings. And so we know that because throughout the chapters, right, and the Buddha provides his similes and his parables and all the stories and the different teachings that are important and essential to our practice, we know that he's hitting every point of different types of people, right? And so as we read the sutra and go through different chapters, we'll see the kind of the progression of teachings, the progression of how sentient beings are able to comprehend the sutras or the Dharma in general in order to attain enlightenment. And so as we should know, the very foundations, the basic fundamental teachings of Buddhism are the Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, and 12 Links of Dependent Origination, right? So these are the first teachings in the earlier chapters of the sutra, where the Buddha is mentioning that people who are engrossed in life's pleasures, who entertain their 5 desires, who entertain the pleasures and satisfactions of life, for people who love life, he teaches impermanence. He teaches the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths help us get out of that habit of seeking attachment to pleasurable desires and sensual desires. And then he progresses through that. So those that are then either at the very first level of enlightenment, the Sotapatthana, the stream enterer, he then teaches them to perfect the Eightfold Path and to perfect the Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path. Then that will lead them to the Arhat level, right? An Arhat level is essentially fully enlightened. So you no longer are in the magnet of samsara. You no longer come back. This is your final last life as an Arhat. But then he teaches the 12 links of dependent origination, and those that perfect and attain the Dharma of the 12 links become Pratyeka Buddhas, solitary Buddhas. These are Buddhas who have attained full and complete enlightenment, but just do that. They don't teach, they don't go out to propagate the Dharma, they are simply fully attained, and that's satisfactory enough for them. And then the Buddha goes on to teach the 6 perfections, the 6 paramitas for the Bodhisattvas. So the Bodhisattvas who have attained full enlightenment or are on the journey of attaining enlightenment also need to work on the 6 perfections, because the full ideal of a Bodhisattva is to be able to become enlightened, not just for yourself, but for all other sentient beings, and to help them attain full enlightenment so that they can go back and help all sentient beings as well. And so the 6 perfections are the blueprint of a Bodhisattva. And then finally, the Buddha said, in the later chapter says, I've given you these 3 vehicles, right? The vehicle of Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas. Voice-hearers, Bodhisattvas, and solitary Buddhas. These are what we call the 3 vehicles. So in the end, or toward the end of this sutra, the Buddha mentions, even though I've taught you these 3 vehicles as a means of being able to impact different types of people. Because one of the good things about the Buddha's teachings, or the way he taught, is he didn't just come up to an assembly, he didn't just show up somewhere and just taught randomly, right? He was very methodical in how he taught the Dharma. And so when he would go somewhere, or if he was invited to partake in a meal or to give a Dharma talk, the very first thing he would do is to assess the assembly, assess who's in the audience. And then he used his assessment to kind of create like an educated spiritual guess of the ability of understanding of these people. And so if he was teaching in a small poor village who were people that were illiterate or were low educated or had no education, he would teach them in a way that they would be able to understand. But then if he were to go to a larger city where people were more educated and more literate, or professionals in some sort of craft or vocation, he would teach them at their level, a little bit higher level than the poor village. Or if he were at the palace or teaching to, the royals or the high ministers and Brahmins, etc., he would teach them at a higher level that they would be able to understand, right? So he changes the way he teaches according to who he's teaching. But regardless of how he taught it, the message, the core message, the end result of every single teaching is always the same. He just taught it in a different way so that someone can understand. If you don't understand it this way, I'm going to give you a different example. Maybe you'll understand it that way. If you don't understand this example, I'll give you a third example, right? This is why we have thousands and thousands and thousands of sutras. It's because, and a lot of them are very repetitive, because each one is being taught in discoursed in a different way, but they all have the same meaning. They all have the same end result. That's why we don't have one core teaching, one core text, like a holy text. We have thousands of them because the Buddha taught in thousands of different ways according to who is listening and how would they be able to understand. So that is one of the beautiful things that I have always admired about the Buddha, was his ability to teach the same teaching in various ways. And so the Lotus Sutra specifically is one of the most important, most profound, most prolific sutras that are in existence in Mahayana Buddhism. Even outside of Mahayana Buddhism, even the Theravadins know the Lotus Sutra. They know the importance of the Lotus Sutra in Mahayana tradition. But because the sutra incorporates his kind of, or concludes his teachings, and that's the reason why it's so important, because it doesn't just have one specific teaching like most sutras do, right? This has his collective teachings almost in one, which is kind of a good thing, but also slightly sometimes difficult to comprehend. Sutras at face value are very difficult to understand. So especially in the Lotus Sutra. The Lotus Sutra is full of this mystical imagery and kind of background scenery and different characters and deities and beings and all these different just a plethora of visuals, right? And so it kind of, when you read it for the first time or read at a very superficial level, it really reads like fiction or reads like a storybook almost. But that is done that way for a reason. But we also have to keep in mind the time of when the sutra was created and the time and understanding of the people of the time, right? The people of the time, during the Buddhist time, you couldn't speak to them directly of the Abhidharma, right? The Buddhist psychology. You couldn't teach them about consciousness and about the different psychological thrills that come within our practice. They wouldn't understand it that way. So the Buddha had to implement imagery of their time for them to understand. And so the imagery of the time were different characters. And so in almost every chapter of the sutra, we'll read about humans and non-humans, nagas, asuras, garudas, kinnaras, mahoragas, and heavenly beings and hell beings and spirits and all these different things. But as hopefully developing practitioners, we don't take that at face value. These are not actual beings and creatures and spirits of some weird spiritual realm. It can be, probably is, in the line, but each of those different types of characters, each of those beings represent something very specific. And so when we read it at face value, without knowing the history of Buddhism, without knowing the history of the sutras, without knowing the kind of definitions of these different characters and beings, it's difficult to really comprehend, which makes reading sutras sometimes difficult for those that are either new to Buddhism or don't study Buddhism at a kind of scholarly position. So we both have to be kind of a scholar and a practitioner at the same time. Because if you do one without the other, you're not going to get it. If you do only the scholarly part without practicing, it's not going to make sense. But if you only practice without being a scholar, it also won't make sense. So you really need to have a good hands-on practice on both ends. We have to, it's as important to understand, comprehend the sutras and the teachings from a logical, fundamental level, but it's also as important to actually take those teachings and put them into practice. And that is one of the emphasis on this chapter is the Buddha's telling the bodhisattvas and the monks and nuns and laymen and laywomen, he's entrusting now he's saying to them, now I've completed my teachings on the Lotus Sutra. I have concluded my teachings on how you can become a bodhisattva and how you can become a Buddha in order to help all sentient beings also attain Buddhahood. So now that I've given you my teachings and it's complete, I'm entrusting you, the bodhisattvas, the arhats, the bhikshus and bhikshunis, the upasakas and upasikas, laymen and laywomen, to take these teachings and to read it, recite it, and propagate it, and uphold it, and disseminate these teachings far and wide. And this, of course, can't be done without the Sangha. More specifically, back in the day, the monastic Sangha, right? That was the only way that the Dharma was able to be propagated, to only be understood and taught and spread. Nowadays, because we have the internet, a plethora of resources out there, it's not just on the responsibility of the monks and nuns and the monasteries and temples to care for and propagate and uphold and read and recite the sutras. Now it's also everyone else's responsibility as well. So now that you have the means to obtain the Dharma, the means to practice the Dharma, the means to realize the Dharma outside of temples and monasteries, that gives you responsibility in holding on to this Dharma and making sure that it stays correct and relevant and what's the word I'm looking for? Undistorted. Correct, right? And so, which kind of unfortunately happened because the internet's just a pool of everyone else's opinions and ideas and perceptions. It's difficult to weed out correct from incorrect. But the good thing about that, at least, there's a positive side to this, is that the Buddha very, very often told the disciples that just because I, the Buddha, the fully enlightened one, has given you a teaching and has told you this is the way toward enlightenment, does not mean that's correct for you. You do not have to believe it. What you need to do is go out and practice the Dharma I've taught you. And if it works for you, it works. If it doesn't, move on to a different Dharma, right? And so he gave you your own way to do quality assurance on your own practice. He told you to do it, practice it, complete it, contemplate it, meditate it, realize it. If it happens, it happens. If it's right for you. If it's not right, then move on to another one, right? This is exactly why we have thousands of sutras. Because if you read one sutra and it doesn't make sense to you, then just find its companion sutra. Because there will be one, or if not several. And so when you are able to decipher and apply and realize the Dharma, then it becomes so much more personal to you, right? Otherwise, I would hope that for all of you that are here, all of you that are at least members, I hope that you are here because you've had those realizations, or a realization. You've had the ability to practice, and something worked, something sparked, something gave you that aha moment that told you, that made you feel and realize this is correct, this is what I believe, this is what I've realized, this is what I've contemplated and meditated on, this is I don't know what the right word to use here, but this is it. Just aha moment. I'm using the word aha moment. And so you've had that aha moment and you come back to learn more. And you continue to come back to learn more. So I'm hoping, because you're here and you continue to come back, that you are continually having aha moments, right? Because you have to have those aha moments. And these aha moments are the realizations that we receive when we are meditating or contemplating on a teaching. Because you can't just read the sutra and understand it superficially, right? You can't just say, yeah, this makes sense to me. You're not going to get anything out of that. Something making sense to you is not going to help you. What's going to help you is for you to actually practice it and realize it. There's a difference between realization and understanding. Because you can understand something. I can teach you physics and you can understand it. But until you write out the formulas and do the experiments and do your validation, it won't make sense until then. Likewise, just because you read the sutra, you read the teachings, doesn't mean you've gained anything. You're just as dumb as a newborn. Your mind is brand new. You need to accumulate knowledge in order to realize it. And so throughout the sutra, it is emphasized over and over and over again that it is important to read, recite, uphold, and propagate. Read, recite, uphold, and teach the Lotus Sutra. Uphold here means doing the work. So when we are reading something in this chapter in the sutra, it says this is how to correct your mind when you're in a bad situation. This is how to eradicate sensual desire. This is how to eradicate ego. This is how to lessen your sensual desires, whatever it may be. He's giving you the instructions. But you can't attain anything from just reading it. You have to actually actively put into practice. Linda's a runner. If she said one day, let's just say she never ran ever in her life, and she woke up one day and she's like, I'm going to do a marathon. A full marathon. She's never ran in her life. She's like, it sounds fun, I'm going to go do it. Half a mile in, she collapses and she has a heat stroke or something, ends up in the hospital. You can't do that. What needs to be done for a marathon? You have to train. And often for months on end, right? So marathons, how many miles? 30 something? 26. That's a long time. That's a hefty, that's from like here to what? Universal City, New Braunfels? I don't know what's there anymore, but that's a long way, right? You can't just get up one day and say, I'm going to do this. You need the preparation. You need to be trained. Likewise, when you're reading a teaching, it's telling you how to become enlightened, right? Which is the goal of Buddhism. You can't just read and say, okay, I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning fully enlightened because I've read the sutra and it makes so much sense to me. Good luck with that. So we have to truly adopt the practices and the teachings to make it make sense to us and to apply it so that making sense becomes a realization. And so the one of the last points of this chapter is that the chapter conveys the idea that the true legacy of the Buddha lies in the continued practice and propagation of the Lotus Sutra, ensuring that the Dharma remains accessible to all beings in the future. And that goes for pretty much anything else in life, right? So let's take this temple, for example. This temple was built by our most venerable abbot, Quang. But this temple will only continue if his legacy of oneness of this temple will continue, meaning having monastic students. So I'm the second generation. And so now my legacy, his legacy transfers to me. So his legacy becomes my legacy. I need to continue this temple, continue for future generations. But if I decide not to do that and just ended it with me, then once I die, then the temple dies. So the continuation of this dies with me. And of course, I do not want that. It's like my biggest fear right now, right? And so the same way, the legacy of the Buddha is not just him being the Buddha, being the enlightened one, but his legacy is the ability to have the Dharma be transmitted and continued on for future generations. And it has so for nearly 2,600 years, right? And so And it's only lasted this long because of its practitioners, because of the bodhisattvas, because of the disciples of the assembly that continue to teach and to learn and to read and recite, propagate, and uphold the sutra. So the Buddha is emphasizing to us the importance of not just him as the Buddha being the teacher and providing you these teachings, but it's also it's just as important for you to take those teachings, apply them in your life, and continue it on to other people so that that legacy can continue on. Side note, now that we're traveling next week, this is your entrustment of us to you to be responsible practitioners while we're out and leading the Sunday services and the evening services. So while we're gone, at least next week, there won't be any Dharma talks. So Leon and the others will hold meditation instead in lieu of Dharma talks, and then just chanting or general service. So that's our entrustment onto you all, right? So you have to take that responsibility as well. But that's the same kind of responsibility that the Buddha is entrusting his disciples and the bodhisattvas, because we are all bodhisattvas. We are all future Buddhas. It may seem like it is nowhere near anytime soon that any of us will be Buddhas, but on a cosmic scale, it may only take a day or two. That may mean for us a couple of million or millions of years, but we won't know about it. We don't know how long that's going to be, right? You don't even know your past lives. You can't miss that, right? And so when the time comes of you becoming a Buddha, it'll be just like, oh, I woke up one day and I'm a Buddha in this one life. But in reality, you've spent millions and millions of lives potentially to become a Buddha. Okay, 3 minutes. The Lotus Sutra not only is, of course, our main sutra for our tradition of this temple, the Tiantai tradition, is our main sutra. And one of the beautiful things I love of this sutra, and I've mentioned it before in the beginning of this talk, is it showcases the relevance of people's abilities to adapt and learn from a ignorant state of mind, of not knowing anything, to knowing so much that you've become now bodhisattvas and Buddhas. And it emphasizes specific teachings. And because of this emphasis on these specific teachings, that now becomes our own personal emphasis. And again, it's the Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, 12 Links to the Pagination, and the 6 Perfections. Those are the core teachings we all need to keep and maintain and uphold day after day, life after life. Those teachings are the teaching that will guarantee you Buddhahood. You're already guaranteed Buddhahood, regardless. But if you practice these teachings and perfect them, then your finish line to that Buddhahood is going to be so much shorter. It's even said in this chapter that those who have ignorant minds of the Dharma need only read one word, one sentence, one paragraph, or one chapter of the Lotus Sutra. Those that have touched or tasted the Dharma also need only read one word, one sentence, one paragraph, or one chapter of the Lotus Sutra. And those that are on the verge of Buddhahood need only read one word, one sentence, one paragraph, or one chapter of the Lotus Sutra. Meaning that regardless of who or what you are, you're entitled to full Buddhahood. by reading one word, one sentence, one paragraph, or one chapter of the Lotus Sutra. So to know that Buddhahood is guaranteed eventually, that enlightenment is simply a lifetime away potentially, should encourage you to want to practice harder, to want to learn more, to want to know and perfect your practice. It always brings a smile to my face, knowing that I'm guaranteed to become a Buddha. It is 100% in my own hands to make that happen. It is 100% in your hands to read, recite, uphold, and propagate the Dharma. I cannot force you to do anything. I can't force you to understand. I can't force you to read something. I can't force you to want to become a bodhisattva or a Buddha, right? You are here all on your own volition, I hope. And so that also means that it is up to your own volition to practice and to attain enlightenment. Even if it's just the first level of enlightenment. Even if you've just gotten a taste of an aha moment. Because aha moments can come in most random, mundane activities in life. It doesn't have to be within meditation or within practicing the Dharma. You can be sweeping the floors and you can have a spark of enlightenment. And that's actually happened. One of the stories, I don't think it's in the Lotus, but there's a sutra about, during the Buddhist time, there were two brothers that joined the Sangha that came from a pretty rich, known family. The older brother was very smart, very intellectual, very studious, very was able to kind of master anything he put his mind onto. Whereas the younger brother was almost the opposite. He was kind of dumb. He didn't really remember things. He forgot things very quickly. He couldn't even remember one gatha, one line of Dharma. And so the Buddha gave him, when the Buddha found out that he couldn't maintain any Dharma or couldn't memorize any Dharma, because again, back in the day it was all oral. You had to memorize sutras. But he couldn't. And so the Buddha instead gave him a task to remember only 3 words. And for the life of me, I can't remember what those 3 words are. But he gave him that mantra and said, just recite this mantra over and over again. It was like 3 words, I think, right? And so Buddha would recite it, and then he would recite it. And the Buddha would recite it again, and he would recite it again. The Buddha would recite it the 3rd time, and he would recite it. And the Buddha would tell him, okay, now it's your turn to do it on your own. And he would remember like 1 or 2 of the words, then 1 of the words, then all 3 of the words, and 2 of the words. So again, he had very difficulty memorizing just 3 words. But then he gave him the task to go to the nunnery and to teach the Dharma. He didn't do this to put him in a situation where he couldn't fulfill, right? Because he's dumb and he couldn't memorize or know any Dharma. So to send someone who doesn't know Dharma or can't memorize, understand, or comprehend things to send them to do a teaching sounds kind of backhanded. But he did that on purpose. The Buddha did that on purpose, because when he went to the nunnery, when the younger brother went back to the nunnery, instead of teaching the Dharma, because he had nothing to teach, he was like, I don't have anything to teach you, I'll just do some chores instead. So he picked up the broom and just started sweeping and sweeping and sweeping. And as he was sweeping, he was able to recollect that mantra over some time, right? He remembered 1 word, and after a while he remembered 2 of the words, and after a while he remembered 3 of the words. And so he was reciting this mantra over and over again, loudly, out loud, while sweeping. And then at the end of the day, he went back to the monastery. And then the next day, when the nuns came back and kind of gave the Buddha an update about their Dharma teaching, the nuns all said that this was the best Dharma talk they've ever received. And the other monks were like, that's impossible. This monk knows nothing. There's no way he gave you the best Dharma talk you've ever heard. And so they asked him, well, what did he do? He's like, well, he taught us how to sweep, and they were reciting the 3 mantra words, and I can't remember. But it essentially allowed the nuns to recognize that sweeping was a symbolic gesture of sweeping away of our afflictions, of all our defilements, of all our hindrances, of all our ignorances, of all of our hatred and greed and anger, sweeping it away, sweeping it away. So that's essentially what the Dharma is. That's what our practice is sweeping away those defilements that we have, right? We're picking out those weeds. We're eradicating our defilements. We're eradicating our hindrances, eradicating our ignorance and greed and anger. That is how our practice works. You can't just read, meditate a couple of times, and all of a sudden have an aha moment. No. You have so much baggage from millions of lifetimes stuck in your store consciousness, your alaya vijnana. It's stuck there. So you have all these defilements, all this bad karma that you need to eradicate first, right? And so as we practice and we start to slowly deepen our practice and slowly deepen our understanding and have more longer aha moments, realizations, then those short bursts of aha moments become longer and longer until it's permanent. That is full, complete enlightenment. Anuttara samyak sambodhi. So that's our goal. To do. It's called a practice, right? Not a reading. But eventually we will all get there. And I hope that as you practice and as you meditate, you have those little aha moments and those realizations. It'll encourage you to do more. And I hope that because you're here, you see the benefit. You've tasted the benefit. You've tasted some of those aha moments. And those aha moments can be so subtle that you may not even recognize them as aha moments, as realizations. You may just think that, oh yeah, this makes sense now. And sure, there's a difference between like a full understanding of something where your mind just blown, right? Like, holy crap, just like literally blew my mind. Versus, oh yeah, that makes sense. But essentially, they're both equal to an aha moment. The difference is, though, the whole mind-blowing, it could potentially mean an actual realization, whereas the, oh yeah, that makes sense, is just a simple understanding, which is still essential, right? Because the more you have those simple understandings, it turns into these big aha realizations. But those can happen very subtly, very mundane tasks like cooking or cleaning, right? It doesn't have to be in a spiritual setting necessarily. It may become more evident, more obvious in this type of setting when you have those little aha moments because you're in a place of practice, so it makes sense that something would happen here. But it would make less sense as you're cleaning or doing laundry or dishes. You may just not even think of it. But that's why we also very much emphasize being mindful and being aware. Most importantly of our minds, right? Because there's 3 karmas of mind, speech, and body. But the most important karma is the karma of the mind. Because everything starts as a thought. Everything that you speak or do initiates as a thought. Some of these thoughts are so quick, it may think that you didn't even think of it, right? Which is where the whole quote of think before you talk comes from, or speaking before you think, whatever the stupid quote is, but everything starts as a thought. And so it's the most important type of karma that we have. And so it's the thing that we have to really be the most mindful and aware of as much as we can. And of course, it's tedious to think of having to be mindful 24/7. It's, it's not technically impossible, but it's very tedious to do all the time. I only had 1 cup of coffee today, so excuse me. It becomes a tedious thing to do 24/7, right? At first, we always have to remind yourself to be mindful. You have to be mindful to be mindful, right? Which is fine. which is fine to do. And one thing that I've encouraged my students to do at least is to, because at least for monastic we have 52 gathas, right? For tasks that we do throughout the day. When we wake up, there's a gatha we recite. Putting on the robe, there's a gatha. Brushing our teeth, there's a gatha. Cleaning, walking, ringing the bell, walking to the temple, walking out of the temple. Everything that we do, there's a mantra that we say because it forces us to be mindful and aware of what we're doing in the moment that we're doing it. So I've encouraged my students to do the same thing, right? You don't have to know all the 52. I think I'd give a list to you guys of like 20 something or 30. I'd encourage you to write those on sticky notes and stick them on things around your house. So when you wake up, however way you wake up or wherever you wake up, you see that sticky note with the mantra to wake up, the gatha to wake up. So you recite the gatha to wake up. When you're putting on your clothes in your closet, have a little sticky note of the gatha to put on your clothes. Brushing your teeth, put on the mirror, little gatha to brush your teeth. And so this allows you to always be aware of what you're doing in the moment that you're doing it. Because otherwise, what happens to the majority of people is their daily routine is so routine, it's so automatic that you wake up, you get ready, you eat, you brush your teeth, you go to work or go to school, you do all this stuff and you come back, not even remembering waking up that day. Because our whole day is so routine, it's so automatic. You have no mindfulness of the day. You can't even remember driving to work. Be mindful. It may seem mundane and unimportant to be mindful of getting ready or going to work, but it allows you to train your mind to practice concentration. Because otherwise, what happens? When you're brushing your teeth, you're reading, or you're taking a shower, or you're getting ready, or you're cooking, most people are multitasking. They're daydreaming. They're doing 5,000 things at a time. Or doing other things. And what happens if you're multitasking during cooking? You have a high potential of burning your food, ruining the food, forgetting an ingredient, or adding too much of an ingredient, because you're unmindful. You're daydreaming, you're thinking, you're singing, you're dancing, you're doing other stupid stuff. But if you're mindful and being aware of just the one task that you're doing, then you can make potentially the most delicious meal you've ever made in your life. Because you made more attention. Right? Hasn't our mothers or grandmothers said, oh, I made this with love for you? What does that mean? It means she put in her full attention into this meal for you without multitasking, without being unmindful. She fully committed to being fully aware, fully mindful in the present moment to make this food for you that she made with love. That means she gave her full concentration in order to feed you. And we need to do the same thing with everything else in life. Everything needs your full attention. That's how we become good drivers. You become a mindful driver. You become a defensive driver by being mindful of driving. Otherwise, if you're listening to music, you're talking on the phone, you're talking with friends, you're doing this or doing that, you're not really paying attention to the road, which is your meditation object as you're driving, is paying attention to the road. But we're listening to music, we're listening to podcasts, we're talking to friends, we're doing this, we're doing that. Our object of meditation is no longer our object of meditation. And this causes you to potentially get in an accident, someone hits you, you hit them, chaos ensures after that. Because you are unmindful. Same thing with cooking, same thing with cleaning. Anything you do, if you put your full attention to it, and we know this, think of going to school when you're studying. What is more conducive to your studies? Being fully aware and concentrating on your studies, or having music on one side and watching a movie on the other side and texting your friends at the same time. So you have all these distractions while you're trying to study. Who do you think is going to get the better grade? Someone who fully concentrated on the studies, or someone that just kind of half-assed it and just hope for the best? Likewise, we can't half-ass our study or practice. Excuse me. But we can't just hope for the best. We can't just let things be when we're practicing. This is a practice of the here and now, right? We're not practicing for another life. For all you know, there's no such thing as another life. I mean, in Buddhism we do. But we can't say for sure. right? You're not practicing for future lives. You're not practicing for having a better next life. You're practicing to have a better life now. Because a better life now, a more concentrated and more liberated mind now, will guarantee you a better next life. But we can't just read and chant once a week and do things every so often and then hope for a better life now and hope for hope for another better life and then rewind. You can't expect a better life now and a better life in our next life by just reading and hoping for the best. I'm so over my time. But that's my entrustment to you all. As I entrust you to practice diligently and correctly and effectively. Okay. Any questions, concerns, emotional outbursts? Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you for the Dharma talk. My question is in regards to realizations. And so I just wanted to kind of just explain where I'm at in my spiritual practice. So for myself, I find that I have a lot more clarity throughout the day when my body is physically active, moving, exercising, taking hikes, being present in nature. If I'm cleaning my house, if I am driving, if I'm doing mantras, if I am chanting. I have a lot of realizations that are coming through throughout the day, and it kind of just feels like a constant stream for most days. But the part that I'm struggling with in regards to practice is sitting. And what I mean by that is I can be sitting, let's say for example here on Wednesday evening, we're chanting and we sit for meditation. A certain time starts to pass and then all of my senses go to the wayside. For myself, there's been times in Dharma talks where you say, if you guys are not focusing on your corrective defects, your psychic aggregates, your imperfections, then what are you doing? I remember you saying that verbatim at one point, and I was like, okay, what am I doing, right? but for me, and I know this reveals like my current state of consciousness, but for me, it's like if I get to the point of meditation where all of my senses have gone to the wayside, I don't feel my body, I don't hear anything, I don't see anything, I don't do anything, and I get to a place of stillness and all of the stream of thoughts have stopped. It seems to me like when taking a step backwards, I start to focus on a certain defect or a psychic aggregate because I feel like that ignites my thoughts. And then I don't know, I feel like I'm doing something wrong. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I don't want you to think that once you get to that point, right, of thoughtlessness, that thinking is a bad thing. Because it's in that state of thoughtlessness where your mind is calm and empty enough to allow contemplation to occur. Okay? And so as long as you're pulling in a topic to contemplate, it's not necessarily thinking, right? Because thinking, for the most part, is different than contemplation. Because thinking, you're just thinking, oh, you know, you saw someone pass by and you think you're wondering who that is. Versus if you're contemplating, a contemplation meditation is analyzing the topic, analyzing the teaching. You're pulling it apart, you're dissecting it, you're trying to reveal its true nature so that you can absorb that true nature and have that realization from that contemplation. Okay? And so when you're in meditation, you get to the point of steadiness, right? Of stillness, and you allow something to be brought up. As long as it's being brought up in a contemplative sense and not just thinking about it or just not having a random thought, then that's perfectly fine. That's what you're supposed to be doing. Because we cannot truly contemplate fully, if we have not yet mastered to a certain degree how to concentrate. Because if you try to contemplate without mastering or semi-mastering concentration, when you try to contemplate, you have a very, very high chance of not being able to sit without contemplation for too long. Because then other thoughts and other ideas start to arise, or you might start to branch off from the initial contemplation to other things, and you branch off here and there, so it becomes useless, right? And so to be able to get to a degree of meditation where you have a near perfect or good enough concentration, then you need to utilize that by contemplating. Otherwise, what are you doing? Because we can't, there's no attaining anything in concentration. With the still mind, there's no realization there, right? So when we're practicing samatha, or having full samadhi, right? Full deep concentration, it doesn't do anything for you. You've just perfected concentration, but there's no realization that comes from that. Realization can only occur via contemplation, via dissecting the teaching, pulling it apart, trying to reach its core teaching, its core meaning, and taking it from there. How would that make sense? Yes, sir.
Sounds like you're saying that we have, while in a concentrated state, are different than everyday normal random thoughts, because the random thoughts, if we're not being present, we tend to have a thought and we get on board and we go away with that thought.
Mm-hmm.
We're a million miles away. And so in that case, where the thoughts are, we're not trying to say thoughts are bad, right?
Right.
Nothing else is either good or bad. We have thoughts and concentration are very powerful because they are here and now.
Right. Right. Because so think of when we're meditating and a thought arises. What do? Right? What's the correct thing and what's the bad thing that happens when a thought arises during meditation? Correct. So exactly, right. So you start entertaining that thought and you create a movie and it takes you out to different lands, different countries, and so your body is here but your mind is elsewhere. Versus if you're meditating and a thought arises, let's say the door opens, right? That will be both a good thing and a bad thing. Bad thing is what? The door opens, you hear the noise, you're thinking, oh, who is that? Why are they late? Why are they ruining my meditation? They're making too much noise, they're blah, 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 right? You're creating a storyline that isn't truthful whatsoever. That's the bad thing. The correct thing to do is, when the door opens, you just make the mental note, door, or sound. That way, your mind and body stays here, versus your body is here, but your mind goes elsewhere.
That's why in the Stoppers there's sensations and then mental formation.
Right.
Sensation is the sound waves at the door when it opens in your eardrum. That's a sensation.
Mm-hmm.
And a mental formation is what you say is when you take that sensation and start the story.
Correct. So a sensation would be like a picture, whereas mental formation would be like the caption. You're describing the sensation is what a mental formation would be. Correct. Exactly. Yeah. You be aware that it's there. Otherwise, you allow it to drag on and create an endless stream of entertainment, and not the good kind. Yes, ma'am.
Is it incorrect to study or review other methods
Of what?
of like psychology or cognitive behavioral therapy, or is what sometimes I get the feeling that this is the only way. I like to read other things.
Right.
That seem to help me. Is that incorrect?
That is not incorrect. That's perfectly fine.
Is it deepens the understanding, right?
Correct, right. Because
I feel like it's deep into understanding. You're able to evaluate other methods, other views, and even incorporate some of them into what you are, into what you're doing.
So I see a thread almost between everything. Buddhism, there's a thread between all of them.
In many ways, yeah. Because like even when we talk about, even when we talk about different religions, like I appreciate so much how the abbot would say Jesus was an excellent teacher. He equates him to Buddha. He said they were both excellent teachers. They were both people, and they both had things to offer and to guide us and plans and which guide us and blueprints for life and things. So I think all of that is helpful. Just appreciating different ideas. I love the way Buddhism does that. Everything is taken into consideration. Everything is something that we can learn from. And they don't want to say, oh, well, that's wrong, that was wrong. We keep an open mind and we appreciate everything for what it is, and then try to fit some pieces of it to bring it together.
Sometimes I hear so conditioned by Christianity that that's the only way. That is not Buddhism.
in Buddhism, there's the section of the Tripitaka called Abhidharma, which is Buddhist psychology, right? It's literally just psychology, right? Because if anything else, Buddhism is mostly psychology. Because Buddhism is all about the mind, right? It's a evaluating, self-help type of practice, right? It's very mind-centered. And so anything that is going to help you discover your true mind is going to benefit you, whether it's part of Buddhism or not, right? And the Buddha even told his disciples, even if my methods don't work, as long as whatever method you works does not harm yourself or others, you can use it. But if there's any harm to yourself or to others, then it's not a good teaching. That's how you can define good teaching. If it has no harm to yourself or to others, then it's a good teaching. Whether it's Buddhism or Christianity or Judaism, whatever it may be. If it does not harm yourself or others, use it. If it's going to help you, do what you need to do. Okay, I'm going to stop since we are very behind time. So we will transfer the merit and then go to chanting. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha Namo Shakyamuni Buddha Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Any positive karmic action we have accumulated here today, we wish to transfer the merit to all sentient beings and wish them full merit. Please go to page 216. Page 216, inviting the bell. Peace, speech, and mind, and perfect one, I send my heart along with the sound of the bell. May the hearers awake from forgetfulness and transcend all anxiety and sorrow. Listen, listen, this wonderful brings me back to my true home. Gratitude we offer this incense to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas throughout space and time. May it be fragrant as earth. Our careful efforts, our wholehearted, mindful, and the fruit of understanding slowly ripening. May we and all beings be companions of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas. May we awake from forgetfulness and realize our true home. Incense in the censer now is burning, all the Dharma realm in every auspicious clouds appearing, our sincere intention thus fulfilling, as all Buddhas now show their perfect body. Homage to the incense cloud canopy, Bodhisattva and great Bodhisattvas. Mid to the eternally abiding Buddhas, the supreme Dharma and sagely Sangha throughout the Dharma realm and the realm of empties and three periods of time. To the fundamental teacher Shakyamuni Buddha Maitreya, honored future Buddha Manjushri, great wisdom Bodhisattva, universal great conduct Bodhisattva, all Dharma guarding Deva Bodhisattvas, and the glorious Mount Assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. To Amitabha Buddha in the land of ultimate Avalokiteshvara, great compassion Bodhisattva, great strength Bodhisattva, earth-stored great vow Bodhisattva, and the assembly of great pure sea like Bodhisattvas. Satvaya Mahasatvaya Mahakarunikaya Om Sarvaravaye Sudanadasya Namaskritva Himamadya Palokiteshvararam Dava Namo Narakinde Vimahava Sarvarhatu Shubham Ajiyam Sarva Sattva Namo Vastava Namo Mavitatu Tagyata Om Avaloke Lokate Karate Hiri Mahabodhisattva Sarva Sarva Koro Koro Karmam Doro Doro Vishati Mahavishati Dara Dara Dirineshvaraya Chala Chala Mama Vimala Muktilehi Shena Shena Hasham Prashari Visha Vishwam Prashaya Holo Mara Holo Holo He Sara Siri Siri Soro Soro Bodhaya 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 Maitreya Narakende Vishanena Prayamara Swaha Siddhaya Swaha Mahasiddhaya Swaha Siddhayogeshvaraya Swaha Narakinde Swaha Maranara Swaha Sirasimha Mukaya Swaha Sarva Mahasiddhaya Swaha Chakra Siddhaya Swaha Padmakastaya Swaha Narakindi Bhagalaya Swaha Mavari Sankaraya Swaha Namo Ratnatrayaya Namo Arya Palokiteshvaraya Swaha Om Siryanto Mantrapadaya Swaha. My body is bringing morning light and concentration. My heart, a half smile is born on my lips. This is a new day, and I vow to go through it in mindful. The sun of wisdom has risen, shining in every direction. Noble Sangha, diligently bring your mind into medit. Namo Shakyamunaya Buddhaya. Namo Shakyamunaya Buddhaya. Namo Shakyamunaya Buddhaya. Unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in hundreds of billions of eons. I now see and receive and uphold it, and I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Namo Ulambana, assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Buddha speaks the Ulambana Sutra, thus I have heard at one time the Buddha dwelt at Shravasti in the garden of the benefact of orphans, and the solitary Mahamoggadayana had just obtained the sixth penetration and wished to cross over his father and mother to repay their kindness for raising us using his way. He regarded the world and saw that his deceased mother had been born among the hungry ghosts, had neither food nor drink. She was but skin and bones. Mahamoggadayana felt pity and sat filled a bowl with food and went to provide for his mother. She got the bowl, screened it with her left right hand, made a fist of food, but before it entered her mouth, it turned into burning coals which could not be eaten. Mahamoggadayana called out and wept sorrow to return to the Buddha to set forth all of this. The Buddha said, your mother's offenses are deep and firmly rooted. You alone do not have enough power, although your filial sounds move heaven and earth. The heaven spirits, the earth spirits, visit demons and those outside the Brahmins, and the four heavenly king gods are also without sufficient strength. The awesome spiritual path of the assembled Sangha of the 10 directions is necessary for liberation to be attained. I shall now speak a dharma of rest, which causes all those in difficulty to leave worry and suffering, and to eradicate obstacles from offense. The Buddha told Moggadayana, the 15th day of the 7th month is the Pravadana day for the assembled Sangha. Directions for the sake of fathers and mothers of 7 generations past, as well as for the and mothers of the present who are in distress. You should prepare an offering of clean basins full of hundreds of flavors and of 5 fruits and other of incense, oil, lamps, candles, beds, and bedding, all the best of the world to the greatly virtuous assembled Sangha of the 10 directions. On that day all the holy assembly, whether in mountains practicing dhyan samadhi or obtaining the 4 fruits of the way, or walking beneath trees, or using the pendants of the 6 penetrations to teach and transform sound hearers and those enlightened to conditions, or provisionally manifesting as pictures. Fact, they are great bodhisattvas on the 10th ground, all complete with an ocean-like virtue of the holy way, should gather in a great assembly, and all of like mind receive the Pravadana food. If one thus makes offerings to these Pravadana Sangha, one's present father and mother, parents of 7 generations past, as well as the 6 kinds of close relatives, will escape from the 3 past suffering, and at the time attain release. Their clothing and food will spontaneously appear. If the parents are still alive, they will have wealth and blessings for 100 years. years, parents of 7 generations. Be born in the heavens, transformationally born, they will independently enter the celestial flower light and experience limitless bliss. At the time the Buddha commanded the assembled Sangha of the 10 directions to recite mantras of the donor's family for parents of 7 generations. After practicing dhyana concentration, the Sangha accepted the food when they first received the base. They placed it before the Buddha in the stupa. When the assembled Sangha had finished the mantras and vows, they received the food. At the time the Bhikshu Moggallana and the assembly of great bodhisattvas were all extremely delighted, and the sorrowful sound of Moggallana's crying ceased. At the time Moggallana's mother obtained liberation from 1 kalpa of suffering. Moggallana addressed the Buddha and said, "This disciple's parents have received the power of the merit and virtue of the triple jewel because of the awesome spiritual power of the assembled Sangha. If in the future the Buddha's disciples practice filially by offering to the Ulambana basins, they will be able to cross over their present fathers and mothers, as well as those of 7 generations past." The Buddha replied, "Good indeed, I am happy you asked that question. I just wanted to speak about that, and now you have also asked about it. Good man, if bhikshus, bhikshunis, king, crown princes, great ministers, great officials, cabinet members, and the tens of thousands of citizens wish to practice compassionate filial conduct for the sake of the parents who, as well as for the sake of fathers and mothers of 7 lives, pass on the 15th day of the 7th month, the day of the Buddha's delight, the day of the Sangha's pravardhana. They all should place hundreds of flavors of foods in Ulambana basins and offer them to the pravardhana Sangha of the 10 directions. They should vow to cause the length of their present fathers and mothers' lives to reach 100 years without illnesses, without sufferings, afflictions, or worries, and also vow to cause 7 generations of fathers and mothers to leave the sufferings of the hungry ghosts, to be born among humans and gods, and to have blessings and bliss without the good men and good women, those disciples of the Buddha who cultivate filial conduct, should in thought after thought constantly recall their present fathers and mothers when making offerings, as well as the fathers and mothers of 7 lives past, and for their sakes perform the offering of the Ulambana base to the Buddha and the Sangha, and thus repay the loving kindness of the parents who raise and nourish. At the time the Bhikshu Moggallana and the fourfold assembly of disciples, hearing what the Buddha said, practice it with delight. Namo Moggallana Bodhisattva Mahasattva. Namo Moggallana Bodhisattva Mahasattva. Namo Moggallana Bodhisattva Mahasattva. Heart of the Prajnaparamita, the Bodhisattva Avalokita, while moving in the deep course of Prajnaparamita, shed light on the 5 skandhas and found them equally empty. After this penetration, he overcame ill-being, and Shadiput, form is emptiness. emptiness. Emptiness is form. Form is not other than emptiness. Emptiness is not other than form. The same is true with feelings, perceptions, mental formation, consciousness. Listen, Shariputra, all dharmas are marked with emptiness. They are neither produced nor destroyed, neither defiled nor immaculate, neither increasing nor decreasing. Therefore, in emptiness is neither form nor feelings, no perceptions or mental formations or consciousness, no eye or ear or nose or tongue or body or mind, no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object of mind, no realms of elements, no interdependent origin of them, no ill-being, no cause of ill-being, no end of ill-being, and no path, no understanding, no attainment, because there is no attainment. The Bodhisattva's ground in Prajnaparamita find no obstacles. Minds having no obstacles, they overcome fear, liberating themselves forever from illusion and realizing perfect nirvana. All Buddhas in the past, present, and future arrive at Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. Therefore, one, the perfect understanding is the highest mantra, the unequaled mantra, the destroyer of ill-being, the incorruptible truth. The mantra Prajnaparamita should therefore be proclaimed. Gate, gate, para, samgate, bodhi, swaha, gate, para, samgate, bodhi, swaha, gate, para, samgate, bodhi, swaha. Namo Amitabhaya, Tathagata, Tadyata, Amrita Bhavi, Amrita Siddham Bhavi, Amrita Vikranta Gamini Gagana Kirta Kare Swaha. Namo Amitabhaya, Tathagata, Tadyata, Amrita Bhavi, Amrita Siddham Bhavi, Amrita Vikranta Gamini Gagana Kirta Kare Swaha. Namo Amitabhaya, Gataya Tadyata, Amrita Bhavi, Amrita Siddham Bhavi, Amrita Vikranta Gamini Gagana Kirta Kare Swaha. Take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and of love. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community that lives in harmony and awareness. In the refuge of Buddha, I clearly see the path of light and beauty in the world. Dwelling in the refuge of Dharma, I learn to open many doors on the path of transformation. Dwelling in the refuge of Sangha, shining light that supports me, keeping my practice free of obstruction. Refuge in the Buddha, in my myself, I aspire to help all people recognize their own awakened nature, realizing the mind of love, taking refuge in the Dharma. In myself I aspire to help all people fully master the ways of practice and walk together on the path of liberation, taking refuge in the Sangha. In myself I aspire to help all people build fourfold community, to embrace all beings and support their trend. Citing the sutras, practicing the ways of to share the fruits with all beings, we vow to offer tribute to parents, teachers, friends, and numerous beings who give guidance and support along the